frost glitters endlessly across the Eurasian steppe 40,000 years ago. Glacial winds carve intricate, shifting patterns into the compacted snow, transforming the terrain into a brilliant white ocean under a pale sky. Against this frozen horizon, a solitary figure moves with deliberate purpose. Look closely at the rhythm of the stride. Heels strike the hardened earth first, followed immediately by a smooth, efficient transfer of weight directly to the toes. Arms swing in rhythmic counterbalance. Every biomechanical detail mirrors the precise way you walk down a modern city street today. This traveler stands fully upright, spine aligned, breathing steadily in the thin, frigid air. We are observing Homo neanderthalensis navigating a demanding world with mastery. Deep within the skull of this ancient wanderer resides a complex, capable brain. Synapses fire in astronomical numbers, rapidly processing the topography, tracking the subtle scent of distant pine, and recalling complex migratory routes passed down through countless generations. Such advanced neural architecture demands continuous energy. To fuel this metabolic engine, the traveler pauses, kneeling near a sheltered limestone outcrop to prepare a hearth. Hands encased in thick, weather-beaten skin gather dried moss and meticulously select a piece of iron pyrite. To strike this mineral against a sharp edge of flint requires precision, calculated force, and clear intent. Sparks rain down violently onto the tinder. A tiny, fragile ember catches the dry fibers. Breath gently coaxing the glow into a stable flame reveals an understanding of thermodynamics and chemical reactions. Fire management requires distinct forethought, an intuitive grasp of wind directions, and knowing which surrounding materials will burn longest throughout the frigid night. Through this sudden, glowing light, the eyes reflecting the dancing flames hold a quiet, unmistakable intelligence. They harbor deep memories, recognize seasonal patterns, and anticipate the challenges of tomorrow. This solitary figure does not merely exist in the environment but actively shapes it, utilizing the same fundamental cognitive tools that drive modern human innovation. For hundreds of millennia, these resilient people successfully navigated a constantly shifting, challenging planet. They hunted massive herbivores alongside formidable predators, crafted sophisticated tools from raw stone, and adapted brilliantly to extreme, unpredictable climatic shifts. Stratigraphic layers, stretching from the rugged coasts of Iberia to the Altai Mountains, contain millions of artifacts testifying to their vast reign. Bones rest silently in deep caves, preserving a biological legacy that appears resilient. Countless generations lived, thrived, formed complex social bonds, and dominated the Pleistocene landscape long before our own ancestors arrived to share the continent. Then an anomaly appears in the geological timeline. Just as the radiocarbon dates reach roughly 40,000 years before the present day, the physical evidence abruptly ceases. Rock layers positioned immediately above this specific temporal boundary yield. No more sturdy femurs, no more distinctly shaped skulls, and no newly crafted tools bearing their unique design signature. An entire parallel branch of the human family tree simply vanishes from the physical landscape. Hearths grow cold. Dust settles permanently over ancient campsites. The limestone caves that once echoed with their voices fall silent, holding only the remnants of a faded era. Geological records present us with an awe-inspiring scientific puzzle rather than a mere tragedy. It pushes modern scientific methodology to its limits when tracking a flourishing population as they fade into the earth. Paleontologists meticulously brush away microscopic layers of dirt from ancient hearths, treating every ash flake as a precious data point. Geneticists successfully sequence fragmented DNA, extracted from infinitesimal slivers of ancient bone, achieving feats of biochemical engineering once thought impossible. Human intellect refuses to let the past remain dark or forgotten. We have developed sophisticated technological instruments capable of peering directly through the dense veil of deep time. Laboratories around the world hum with relentless activity today, analyzing trace isotopes and scrutinizing fossilized dental plaque to reconstruct forgotten diets and ancient behaviors. Every piece of data pulled from the hardened Earth serves as a testament to our relentless drive to understand where we came from and who shared this diverse planet with us. We actively seek to illuminate the shadows, transforming a biological disappearance into a story of endurance, connection, and scientific revelation. The vanishing fossil record challenges us to elevate our investigative skills, to ask better questions, and to look beyond the obvious surfaces of history. Before delving into the intricate mechanisms of their specialized physiology and their abstract culture, we must recalibrate our senses. Step away from the frantic, fragmented pace of the modern world. Let the digital noise, the rushing traffic, and the immediate demands of the present day fade from your mind. Imagine the heavy silence of an ancient, unlit cave right before the very first torch sparks to life. Inhale deeply, drawing in the cold, crisp, unfiltered air of the Pleistocene epoch. Exhale slowly, allowing the almost incomprehensible scale of deep time to settle around you. We are not studying a distant, alien creature, but preparing to meet our closest evolutionary kin. Conscious effort is required to adjust our internal clocks. We normally measure our lives in fleeting days, rapid months, and brief years. To understand the journey ahead, we must stretch our imagination to encompass entire millennia, visualizing ice sheets advancing and retreating like slow, rhythmic tides across continents. This deliberate slowing down functions as a necessary ritual. It prepares the mind to absorb monumental shifts in climate, slow evolutionary adaptations, and the subtle, unfolding drama of human survival. Acknowledge the sheer scale of the historical journey waiting just ahead. We are about to embark on a monumental expedition spanning thousands of generations and vast geographical distances. Comprehending these fascinating individuals demands patience, sharp focus, and a willing readiness to discard outdated, rudimentary preconceptions. Over the course of this extensive exploration, we will rebuild their frozen world piece by intricate piece. Science provides us with the precise, verifiable coordinates, but our shared human imagination must vividly reconstruct the breath, the pulse, and the daily struggles. Unraveling the complex details of their dense anatomy, their emerging artistic impulses, and their final days on the continent requires a steady, unhurried, and deeply respectful pace. You are invited to walk alongside them through towering ancient pine forests and across harsh, unforgiving icy tundras. Watch closely how their powerful hands shaped ordinary flint nodules into razor-sharp, specialized blades. Observe how they meticulously cared for their wounded companions, demonstrating deep empathy and complex social structures. Gather around their warm, communal hearths to witness a mind parallel to our own, navigating a primordial world that demanded both physical strength and cognitive flexibility. This journey will challenge everything you thought you knew about what it truly means to be human. We will dismantle old myths and elevate the scientific truth. The stage is now set. The ice extends endlessly outward, the wind whispers through the ancient valleys, and the footprints pressed into the snow invite us to follow. We step forward into the cold, ready to discover the astonishing reality of the beings who walked this earth so long ago. Centuries ago, early anatomists peering at fossilized bones unearthed from a German limestone quarry made a profound miscalculation. During the mid-19th century, a deeply entrenched bias clouded scientific judgment, painting these newly discovered hominins as primitive, slouching simpletons. Sketches from that era depicted them dragging clubs, knuckles scraping the dirt, embodying a biological dead end. Scholars of the Victorian age could not fathom that an equally sophisticated intelligence might have shared our ancestral lineage. They viewed evolution as a single, ascending ladder, with modern humans perched triumphantly alone at the very top rung. Any skeleton deviating from our specific anatomical blueprint was swiftly dismissed as an inferior prototype, a lesser being unworthy of the human title. This damaging caricature originated largely from a single, deeply misunderstood specimen found in France. Researchers examining the famously complete skeleton from La Chapelle-aux-Saints initially concluded that the species naturally exhibited a stooped, ape-like posture. Modern biomechanical analysis, however, tells a remarkably different, far more touching story. Advanced medical imaging techniques reveal that this specific individual suffered from severe osteoarthritis and widespread degenerative joint disease. Far from representing the typical posture of his kin, this elderly man carried debilitating physical burdens. Surviving to such an advanced age with severe mobility issues proves something extraordinary. His community actively nurtured him, providing carefully chewed food and physical protection long after he lost the ability to hunt. Biased historical observers mistook deep social compassion for inherent biological inferiority. Picture two mighty, distinct rivers, carving their way down the landscape, both originating from the same ancient high-altitude glacier. Neither waterway is a flawed version of the other. They follow different topographical paths, responding to unique geographical pressures while carrying the same foundational water. Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis represent these twin currents. Diverging from a common ancestor hundreds of thousands of years ago, they embarked on separate evolutionary journeys. One lineage navigated the sun-drenched savannas of Africa, while the other mastered the rigorous, freezing ecosystems of Eurasia. Neanderthals were never a rough draft meant to be erased or overwritten. They emerged as a brilliant, specialized, parallel design engineered for their specific world. Surviving the intense demands of Pleistocene Europe required physiological mastery. Evolutionary forces meticulously sculpted their bodies to conserve thermal energy and maximize physical output. Following well-established biological principles, their physical forms grew distinctly robust and compact. Biologists recognize these adaptations today as Bergmann's and Allen's rules, explaining how warm-blooded mammals living in colder latitudes develop larger core body masses and shorter extremities to minimize surface area exposed to the chill. Forearms and lower legs grew proportionally shorter than ours, significantly reducing rapid heat loss to the freezing air. Every inch of their skeletal framework prioritized maximum thermal efficiency, transforming their bodies into incredibly effective, heat-retaining engines capable of withstanding extreme environmental shifts. Beneath their thick skin lay a musculoskeletal system of staggering, undeniable power. Cross-sections of their fossilized long bones reveal cortical walls substantially thicker than those found in any modern human athlete. These incredibly dense femurs and humeri anchored massive, heavily developed muscle groups. Striations left on the bone surfaces by muscular attachments indicate physical strength that would easily eclipse our current Olympic weightlifters. Broad, flared rib cages housed enormous lungs, facilitating the rapid oxygen exchange required to sustain such intense muscular output during strenuous activity. Their heavily muscled shoulders allowed them to thrust heavy wooden spears with devastating kinetic force, a necessary adaptation for hunting massive herbivores at extraordinarily close quarters. Moving upward to the face, we observe specialized aerodynamic engineering rather than brute ugliness. An enormous, wide nasal aperture dominated the center of their visage. This expansive nasal cavity functioned as a complex internal radiator and humidifier system. When drawing in frigid, dry air, the extensive network of blood-rich mucous membranes within these spacious chambers rapidly warmed and moisturized the oxygen before it reached their delicate lungs. Heavy brow ridges protected their eyes from blinding glare and physical trauma, while a distinctive forward-projecting midface further distanced sensitive internal tissues from the freezing external environment. These distinct facial characteristics stand today not as primitive remnants, but as elegant, advanced evolutionary solutions to the rigorous problem of breathing sub-zero air during extreme physical exertion. Yet, the most staggering revelation lies hidden within the enclosed architecture of their massive skulls. By casting the hollow interiors of fossilized craniums, paleoneurologists have meticulously measured their internal brain capacities. The results consistently shatter the illusion of our unparalleled intellectual supremacy. On average, their brains measured between 1,500 and 1,600 cubic centimeters. Modern human brains typically range between 1,300 and 1,400 cubic centimeters. They physically housed more grey matter than we do today. Maintaining a larger brain demands extraordinary amounts of daily caloric energy, representing a massive biological investment. Evolution never funds such an expensive metabolic organ unless it provides a crucial advantage for daily survival, complex problem-solving, and environmental mastery. Raw volume alone does not dictate the complete cognitive story. Structural organization within that vast cranial vault differed subtly but purposefully from our own. A pronounced extension at the back of their skulls, recognized medically as the occipital bun, indicates a developed visual cortex. Living in higher latitudes with lower sunlight angles, particularly during the long, dim winters, required exceptional visual processing capabilities. Their brains dedicated substantial neural real estate to seeing clearly in twilight and accurately tracking rapid movements across shadowy landscapes. This specialized visual acuity consumed a large portion of their expanded neural volume, reflecting a mind tuned to visually dissecting the nuanced environment around them with pinpoint precision. Simultaneously, their frontal lobes remained fully developed and highly active. Regions governing complex decision-making, social behavior, and future planning operated with immense sophistication. We must permanently abandon the arrogant assumption that a differently organized brain equates to a dimmer intellect. They possessed the identical foundational neural hardware required for complex abstract thought, tactical planning, and deep emotional bonds. Geneticists have successfully identified the exact FOXP2 gene sequence within their extracted DNA, a vital genetic marker intrinsically linked to speech and advanced language articulation in modern humans. Their large, powerful minds continuously processed vast amounts of sensory data, communicated vital logistical information, and engineered survival strategies that kept their species thriving for over 300,000 years. Consider the sheer magnitude of their biological achievement. Standing before you is a hominin possessing immense physical fortitude, capable of bringing down enormous Pleistocene megafauna, yet possessing a mind vast enough to deeply understand the shifting ecology of their territory. They represented a pinnacle of biological adaptation. Walking upright with biomechanical confidence, their compact bodies easily deflected the biting winds, while their expansive brains mapped stellar movements, tracked seasonal animal migrations, and devised intricate, multi-step solutions to daily challenges. Paleontology reveals a magnificent biological equilibrium. They combined raw physical power with a silent, calculating intelligence. Eradicating the crude prejudices of the past allows us to finally perceive their true scientific grandeur. Modern analysis systematically peels away thick layers of long-held bias, replacing historical ignorance with awe-inspiring facts. When we look at their skeletal remains under the lens of contemporary science, we no longer see a failed experiment or an evolutionary misstep. We observe a masterclass in anatomical engineering. Their dense bones speak volumes of resilience, while their large cranial vaults whisper of unrecorded thoughts. Every anatomical feature we once mocked, as rudimentary, stands today as a testament to their incredible ability to harmonize perfectly with an unforgiving, dynamic world. Possessing such a vast neural network inevitably leads to phenomena stretching far beyond mere physical survival. A brain that large eventually turns its processing power inward, beginning to question the surrounding reality, to imagine new possibilities, and to seek ways to leave intentional marks upon the world, securing daily food, finding warmth, and building sturdy shelter, eventually fail to satisfy the full capacity of an expansive, restless intellect. When basic biological necessities are continuously met through superior hunting strategies and environmental mastery, an intellect of that magnitude inevitably begins to explore the abstract realms of expression. This powerful internal spark drove them to look at blank stone surfaces and envision something unprecedented. The physical hardware was fully assembled, humming with untapped potential, setting the stage for behaviors that would permanently alter our understanding of ancient cognition. Deep beneath the Iberian Peninsula, silence reigns over concealed subterranean galleries. Limestone walls stretching into perpetual darkness hide secrets capable of shattering foundational assumptions regarding human evolutionary history. For countless decades, archaeologists confidently attributed all prehistoric cave artistry exclusively to our direct ancestors. Academic consensus firmly maintained a rigid timeline where abstract reasoning and symbolic expression ignited only after modern humans crossed into the European theatre. We previously visualized an empty, uncultured continent, eagerly awaiting visionary artists bearing flaming torches and vibrant red ochre. Recent technological breakthroughs applied to ancient underground canvases obliterated that deeply entrenched exclusionary narrative. Advanced radiometric analysis directed at microscopic layers of calcium carbonate revealed an astonishing truth hiding in plain sight. Geologists do not directly test ancient red pigment because carbon dating fails completely on inorganic iron oxide. Researchers instead target translucent mineral crusts, slowly accumulating over the artwork through millennia of dripping subterranean water. Measuring radioactive uranium isotopes slowly transitioning into thorium within these thin calcite blankets provides a rock-solid, irrefutable minimum age for the markings underneath. Scientists carefully extracted tiny mineral flakes from 3 distinct Spanish cave systems, La Pasiega, Maltravieso, and Ardales, and fed them into highly sensitive mass spectrometers. Numbers emerging from the laboratory readouts instantly sent shockwaves through the global anthropological community. Analytical data definitively pinned the creation of these specific cave markings to at least 64,800 years ago. Recognizing this temporal gap requires matching the newly discovered dates against our established fossil record. Modern Homo sapiens did not set foot on the European continent until approximately 45,000 years before the present era. A vast expanse of roughly 20 millennia exists between the moment those vivid red hues stained the cavern walls and the earliest possible arrival of our own species. Consequently, only one specific group of sentient beings could have authored these enigmatic designs. Neanderthals confidently traversed those damp, lightless corridors, processed earthy hematite, and intentionally left their enduring signatures deep within the intricate limestone labyrinths. Such a rupture in the established timeline of consciousness permanently dismantles the arrogant assumption that advanced cognitive sophistication belonged exclusively to us. Observe closely how these ancient minds approached their vast, unlit canvases. Within Maltravieso's winding corridors, a singular, breathtaking image commands immediate reverence. An individual firmly pressed a left hand against the rigid, uneven rock face. Another participant, or perhaps the same solitary artist manipulating a bone tube, blew a fine mist of pulverized red ochre from their mouth directly over the outstretched fingers. Removing the hand revealed a flawless negative silhouette, perfectly preserved in the vibrant crimson dust. Pigment pressed onto cold stone functioned as the first silent mirror of the mind, fundamentally sharing the human drive to create art. Executing such an image represents a monumental cognitive leap outward from mere biological survival. It loudly declares an acute awareness of self, capturing a fleeting physical presence and freezing it permanently across millennia. The artist deliberately separated their own individual identity from the natural world, actively externalizing internal consciousness for others to witness. As observers venture further toward La Pasiega's damp chambers, they encounter different layers of striking cognitive complexity. Vivid red lines intersect at deliberate right angles to form an imposing, ladder-like geometric shape known technically as a scalariform. Crafting abstract geometry demands distinct neural pathways compared to casually sketching recognizable prey animals or tracing natural silhouettes. Linear, rigid motifs do not mimic anything naturally found in the surrounding, chaotic Pleistocene landscape. These intersecting shapes originate purely from within the creator's vast neural networks, demonstrating a biological capacity for symbolic thought. Abstract lines carry hidden, encoded meanings, perhaps tracking complex lunar cycles, marking vital territorial boundaries, or representing spiritual concepts lost to modern interpretation. The execution of these designs deep underground eliminates any remaining possibility of casual, accidental smudging. Suffocating darkness swallows these deep caverns. Reaching the painted panels required extraordinary foresight and meticulous logistical preparation. Ancient subterranean explorers had to construct reliable light sources, carefully rendering animal fats into slow-burning lamps, guaranteed not to extinguish in the stale, oxygen-depleted air. Prospectors actively scoured distant valleys to harvest high-quality iron oxide deposits, transporting heavy mineral chunks back to their encampments. To grind those raw materials into fine, usable powders using dense granite mortars required immense physical patience. Mixing the resulting pigment with specific organic binders like saliva or rendered animal fluid demonstrates a working knowledge of elementary chemistry. Every deliberate step throughout this arduous process points to clear intentionality and complex forward planning. Expression of internal identity extended far beyond distant subterranean rock faces, spilling brilliantly out into the sunlit world. Sunlight illuminated other sophisticated cultural practices previously ignored or dismissed by mainstream science. Excavations conducted at the Krapina rock shelter in modern-day Croatia unearthed a spectacular collection of white-tailed eagle talons exhibiting precise cut marks and intentional heavy polishing. Dating back roughly 130,000 years, these formidable claws were carefully strung together to form an imposing, visually striking necklace or bracelet. Eagles provide insufficient dietary meat to justify the immense, life-threatening danger of hunting them. The harvesting of these apex avian predators served a symbolic, socially complex purpose. Wearing sharp talons openly communicated elevated status, physical strength, or distinct tribal affiliation to anyone observing the wearer. Similarly, magnificent discoveries within Cueva de los Aviones in southeastern Spain yielded ancient cockle shells meticulously perforated and intentionally stained with mixed yellow and red earthy pigments. Stratigraphic dating pushes these specific artifacts back to over 115,000 years ago. The crafting of delicate personal adornment proves an inherent, burning desire to curate how an individual is perceived by the broader community. Adorning a physical body with brightly colored marine shells indicates a nuanced social fabric where visual language spoke volumes before a single spoken word echoed across the valley. Such deliberate behaviors fundamentally prove that aesthetic appreciation remains universally hominin. We share this undeniable creative impulse deeply with our ancient, rugged evolutionary siblings. A silent posture before a prehistoric red-hand stencil forces modern observers to confront a mesmerizing, paradigm-altering realization. 5 distinct digits radiate outward from a central palm, outlined perfectly in ancient ochre now chemically bonded with the crystalline limestone. When you press your own modern hand near the ancient negative space, identical, deeply familiar proportions are revealed. Across tens of thousands of turbulent years, an invisible thread connects two distinct human species through a shared, universal language of visual representation. Art miraculously transcends biological divergence and deep time. Visual expression serves as an enduring testament to an awakened intellect, striving to declare its own existence against the indifferent cosmos. These pigment-stained walls scream a silent but deafening message, affirming their presence, their self-awareness, and their enduring historical significance. Acoustic dynamics within these decorated subterranean chambers add yet another fascinating layer to our evolving understanding of their complex rituals. Archaeologists increasingly map the exact locations of prehistoric markings alongside naturally occurring sound resonances hidden within the cave structures. Areas featuring the highest concentrations of red ochre frequently align perfectly with distinct acoustic hotspots, locations where a sharp clap or a vocalized chant reverberates intensely down the lightless corridors. The combination of intense visual stimulation with overwhelming auditory feedback strongly hints at complex, multisensory ceremonies occurring deep underground. Chants echoing off damp walls while flickering fat lamps cast towering, dancing shadows would effortlessly elevate a simple pigment drawing into an immersive, transcendent psychological experience. Such orchestrated tribal gatherings would bond community members tightly together, forging shared cultural narratives and actively passing crucial survival knowledge down through subsequent generations. Acknowledging these majestic artistic achievements drastically alters how we must rightfully perceive ourselves within the broader biological family tree. Defining true humanity historically relied upon erecting a strict, impenetrable boundary, securely placing modern Homo sapiens within a superior category, while exiling all other related hominins to a dismal state of mere animalistic survival. Glowing red hand stencils and perfectly intersecting geometric ladders dismantle that artificial boundary. Our specific species did not uniquely invent the underlying concept of meaning, nor did we single-handedly pioneer the world of abstract thought. We migrated upward into a diverse continent already steeped heavily in rich symbolic tradition. European landscapes were already thoughtfully painted, carefully curated, and culturally defined long before we gathered our belongings to migrate out of the African continent. As their developed cultures flourished across the icy plains and deep forests, these robust artists continued to adapt, endlessly innovate, and paint their rich life stories onto the subterranean canvases of their vast northern territories. They operated unaware that far to the sweltering south, just beyond the great Mediterranean basin. Another separate lineage of upright walking innovators was rapidly expanding its own demographic numbers. Shifting, unpredictable climatic conditions and restless migrations would very soon initiate one of the most consequential biological intersections in all of planetary history. Their isolated sovereignty over the freezing European expanse slowly drew toward an epochal junction. Two distinct, capable branches of a magnificent evolutionary tree were finally destined to cross paths, leaving the sun-baked savannas behind. Small bands of Homo sapiens ventured steadily northward into the temperate corridors of the Levant. Generations pushed outward from their African cradle, driven by subtle climatic shifts and an insatiable biological curiosity to map unknown horizons. These nomadic groups carried distinct physical traits forged under equatorial skies, possessing taller, leaner frames perfectly adapted for rapid heat dissipation. Crossing into the mountainous regions of the Middle East and later expanding toward the sweeping valleys of Europe meant stepping directly into a vast domain managed by different masters. Neanderthals had already memorized every crucial ridgeline, tracked every complex seasonal migration, and thrived within this specific ecology for hundreds of millennia. Picture a colossal hall stripped of furniture, devoid of light, and stretching out toward an unseen horizon. When walking alone through this vast, empty room, you logically expect only the rhythmic echoes of your own isolated footsteps bouncing off the distant walls. Suddenly, a fleeting shadow moves in the far corner. Another figure stands there quietly, breathing the very same air, navigating the exact same cavernous space. Such was the psychological weight when our direct ancestors first encountered Homo neanderthalensis across the prehistoric landscape. Pleistocene. Eurasia stretched out as an unimaginably massive territory, harboring incredibly sparse hominin populations scattered across millions of square miles. Encountering another intelligent band was statistically rare. Coming face to face with a distinct species of human fundamentally altered the psychological fabric of both groups forever. To lock eyes across a frost-covered clearing or a narrow limestone gorge required processing an overwhelming wave of cognitive dissonance. Our migrating ancestors looked upon individuals possessing undeniably different facial architectures, defined by prominent brow ridges, wide nasal apertures, and powerfully muscled physiques. Yet, within those physically divergent vessels, an unmistakable, piercing familiarity shone through brilliantly. These supposed strangers wore thoughtfully crafted garments to ward off the biting chill, clutched precisely engineered wooden spears, and carried the lingering scent of wood smoke on their weathered skin. Looking closely into the gaze of a Neanderthal meant recognizing a mirrored intelligence, an equal capacity for grief, fierce joy, and calculated survival. Biologically separated by immense stretches of deep time, these two groups remained fundamentally tethered by their shared evolutionary foundation. Popular modern narratives frequently dramatize this historical intersection as a sudden, violent conquest. Old textbooks eagerly painted a chaotic, aggressive picture where technologically superior newcomers swiftly eradicated primitive inhabitants in a relentless continental blitzkrieg. Archaeological realities dismantle that simplistic, biased storyline. Radiocarbon dating combined with meticulous stratigraphic analysis reveals a drastically different historical truth characterized by immense patience, mutual observation, and slow integration. When modern humans entered transitional regions like the Middle East, they did not trigger an instantaneous demographic replacement. Instead, the two distinct species shared these vital geographic corridors for at least 10,000 to 15,000 years. Entire millennia slipped by quietly, without catastrophic warfare defining their mutual existence. Consider the magnitude of that time span to grasp the reality of their peaceful overlap. Recorded human history, stretching from the earliest cuneiform tablets of ancient Sumer to the modern digital age, encompasses roughly 5,000 years. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals navigated the exact same rugged landscapes, drank from the same freshwater springs, and hunted identical herds of fallow deer for more than double that entire historical duration. Such a period of coexistence invalidates any theory proposing a rapid, hostile takeover. They existed primarily as respectful neighbors within a staggeringly vast, sparsely populated world, their daily lives intertwining organically through the natural ebb and flow of changing seasons. Excavations within the Mount Carmel cave systems in modern-day Israel provide breathtaking physical evidence of this protracted, overlapping residency. Digging carefully through alternating layers of ancient sediment reveals a remarkably rhythmic pattern of hominin occupation. Neanderthal flint tools rest comfortably beneath Homo sapiens artifacts, only for distinctive Neanderthal implements to reappear securely in the geological strata immediately above. Fluctuating global temperatures dictated these cyclical movements. As glaciers advanced far to the north, pushing the bitter cold southward, resilient Neanderthals expanded their range into the Levant. When the global climate temporarily warmed, retreating ice allowed leaner Homo sapiens to advance northward. They essentially danced a slow, millennia-long waltz across the landscape, advancing and retreating organically rather than engaging in constant territorial disputes. Life in such close geographical proximity inevitably fostered intense, mutual observation. Imagine a sapiens hunting party, silently watching from a high forested ridge as Neanderthals expertly coordinated a complex ambush on a formidable woolly rhinoceros. Witnessing raw tactical brilliance, impeccable timing, and undeniable courage would naturally command respect from any seasoned hunter. Conversely, Neanderthals observing the newly arrived bands might have noticed different methods for napping flint nodules or novel ways of structuring temporary shelters using woven branches. Knowledge possesses an inherent tendency to flow across cultural boundaries whenever intelligent, resourceful minds intersect. The discovery of remarkably similar bone tools and distinctly overlapping lithic technologies in shared prehistoric territories strongly suggests active learning and deliberate exchange. Archaeologists studying the Châtelperronian tool industry in Western Europe uncover fascinating hybrid techniques where traditional Neanderthal core reduction methods beautifully incorporate the lighter, longer blade styles favored by incoming sapiens. Human intellect thrives on rapid adaptation. Neither group would logically ignore valuable survival strategies, successfully demonstrated by capable neighbors. Watching a stranger effortlessly spark a fire using a slightly different mineral or process animal hides with a newly shaped bone scraper inspires immediate mimicry rather than blind hostility. They learned from each other, quietly absorbing different technological philosophies across the flickering light of shared valleys. The navigation of this unprecedented shared existence required massive sociological flexibility. Language barriers undoubtedly existed initially, as slightly divergent vocal tract anatomies and hundreds of thousands of years of separate linguistic evolution created different auditory environments. Overcoming these initial communicative hurdles demanded empathy and a willing readiness to interpret complex hand gestures, subtle facial expressions, and shared physical intentions. To offer a highly prized slab of mammoth meat, point out a concealed water source, or respectfully step aside at a narrow river crossing requires no spoken words. Such actions rely upon a mutual recognition of shared sovereignty. These silent, respectful interactions laid the crucial groundwork for a deeply intertwined biological destiny. We must pause deliberately to truly appreciate the sheer wonder embedded within these ancient encounters. Human history today feels crowded, hyper-connected, and unified under a single biological banner. Grasping what it meant to share the Earth with another parallel human consciousness stretches our modern imagination to its limits. It forces every one of us to realize that humanity never existed as a solitary peak, but rather flourished as a diverse mountain range featuring multiple towering summits. Those ancient individuals possessed the unique privilege of reaching out and literally touching hands with an alternative version of themselves. Their overlapping existence stands today as a powerful testament to the remarkable adaptability and inherent sociability defining the broader hominin lineage. As Homo sapiens populations gradually multiplied and expanded deeper into the dense European heartland, this complex dance of coexistence continued to evolve. Ancient towering forests and sprawling river valleys became shared sanctuaries where distinctly different physical traits blended slowly into a unified ecological narrative. Neither side consciously recognized themselves as unwitting actors in an impending, massive demographic shift. They simply lived their challenging lives, tracking shifting seasons, building warm communal fires, and occasionally crossing paths with those who looked anatomically different but behaved remarkably the same. Peaceful overlap, mutual curiosity, and eventual intimate integration defined their shared timeline far more accurately than any fabricated tale of ancient, merciless warfare. To encounter a Neanderthal encampment from a distance would present an incredibly rich sensory experience for migrating Homo sapiens. Catching the distinct scent of rendering animal fat and hearing the deep, resonant cadence of foreign voices echoing against a limestone cliff would spark an undeniable urge to investigate. Cautious approaches likely transitioned slowly into tentative, mutually beneficial trade. The exchange of high-quality flint sourced from distant quarries for brightly polished eagle talons or exotic marine shells woven into complex necklaces established profound social bridges. Curating these vital relationships guaranteed mutual survival during particularly harsh winters when local resources dwindled drastically. Establishing peaceful treaties with neighboring tribes, regardless of their specific cranial shape or brow size, remains a hallmark of advanced hominin intelligence. Recognizing the undeniable humanity within an evolutionary sibling fundamentally challenges how we view our own ancestors. Our species did not march aggressively across the globe, driven by an insatiable desire to conquer and destroy every living competitor. We migrated with a deep capacity to connect, to observe, and to integrate. Looking into the eyes of a Neanderthal triggered an innate, deeply rooted biological recognition. They recognized kindred spirits possessing the identical drive to protect their young, honor their dead, and survive the punishing elements. This empathy allowed two branches of the human family tree to intertwine their lineages peacefully across the Eurasian continent for tens of thousands of years. Yet, this balanced biological overlap could not remain static forever. Maintaining such delicate demographic harmony requires a stable physical environment capable of consistently providing abundant resources for multiple thriving apex predators. Deep climatic forces operating far beyond the control or comprehension of any hominin species were quietly preparing to rewrite the fundamental rules of survival across the continent. Glacial ice began to dictate entirely new atmospheric rhythms, subtly shifting the very foundation of the Pleistocene ecosystem. Deep ice columns extracted from the frozen heart of Greenland allow modern paleoclimatologists to read the atmospheric history of our planet. Microscopic air bubbles trapped within these ancient crystalline structures function as pristine time capsules, holding distinct ratios of oxygen isotopes that perfectly record prehistoric global temperatures. Analyzing this frozen archive reveals a dynamic era characterized by extreme meteorological volatility rather than a singular, continuous deep freeze. Scientists identify these massive atmospheric fluctuations as Dansgaard-Oeschger events. During these highly unstable periods, global temperatures would suddenly spike upward within a mere decade, only to plunge back into bone-chilling cold shortly after. Such rapid environmental whiplash placed immense biological stress on every living organism attempting to navigate the Eurasian landmass. Flora anchoring the complex food web simply could not migrate or adapt fast enough to survive these violent temperature swings. Palynologists studying ancient pollen grains preserved perfectly within deep lake sediments trace a dramatic botanical transformation cascading across the continent. Dense, towering woodlands that had blanketed Europe for millennia slowly began to fracture. Magnificent stands of oak, beech, and pine gave way to encroaching frost, their roots unable to pull sufficient moisture from the increasingly frozen earth. Sprawling canopies that once provided dense, continuous shade broke apart into isolated, disconnected copses. As the trees retreated toward sheltered valleys, sweeping expanses of resilient grasses and low-lying shrubs aggressively colonized the newly exposed terrain, transforming the enclosed woodland habitats into a vast, wind-scoured mammoth steppe. Visualize their prehistoric European domain as a sprawling estate featuring countless interconnected chambers. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals freely roamed through this immense architectural marvel, finding abundant resources in every specialized room. Deep forests provided essential timber for crafting sturdy spears, while brush-choked ravines offered natural concealment for skilled hunters. Invisible climatological mechanisms slowly began turning heavy keys within ancient locks, shutting down these vital spaces. Doors to the lush woodland chambers clicked shut as the trees died off. Access to familiar, sheltered valleys vanished under advancing ice sheets. Residents of this grand estate found themselves gently but firmly guided into a constantly narrowing corridor, forced to navigate a shrinking ecological reality as their once boundless home consolidated around them. Survival within this newly exposed, brilliantly lit environment required completely different biomechanical advantages. Neanderthal anatomy, engineered for sudden bursts of immense physical power, thrived entirely within dense, complex terrain. Heavy musculature and thick bone structure allowed them to sprint fast over short distances, exploding from behind thick brush to thrust heavy wooden spears directly into unsuspecting prey. We classify this specialized approach as ambush hunting. Utilizing the natural landscape as a vital weapon meant their success relied completely upon proximity and stealth. Once the dense forests vanished, leaving only flat, unbroken horizons in every direction, the fundamental geometry of their survival strategy shattered. Prey animals adapting to the open steppe evolved to rely heavily upon sweeping visual fields and rapid, sustained locomotion. Towering, straight-tusked elephants and woodland rhinoceroses disappeared, replaced quickly by massive, highly mobile herds of reindeer, bison, and woolly mammoths. These magnificent beasts grazed across open plains where they could easily spot an approaching threat from miles away. Stalking a highly alert herd across flat, treeless tundra eliminates any possibility of a close-quarters ambush. Without trees to hide behind or deep gullies to mask their approach, heavily built hunters found themselves fatally exposed. Securing daily calories suddenly demanded chasing fast-moving herds over immense distances, fundamentally shifting the biological requirement from explosive strength to marathon endurance. The carriage of such a robust, powerful frame across vast open distances comes with an astronomical metabolic cost. Thermodynamically, their compact bodies operated like high-performance engines, demanding immense amounts of premium fuel to maintain core temperatures and power massive muscle groups. Anthropological calculations suggest an active Neanderthal adult required upwards of 5,000 calories every single day just to survive the brutal winter conditions, generating that vital energy historically required, bringing down massive game efficiently. When the landscape forced them to walk significantly further to locate food, their daily caloric expenditure skyrocketed, while their hunting success rates simultaneously dropped. Mathematics governing their biological survival grew increasingly unforgiving with every passing generation. Facing this daunting ecological puzzle, these brilliant minds refused to simply surrender to the shifting elements. Archaeological evidence highlights their cognitive flexibility as they actively attempted to rewrite their ancient survival manuals. Flint knappers intentionally modified their traditional lithic technologies, experimenting with different blade shapes to maximize the utility of their shrinking raw material sources. Coastal populations in places like modern-day Italy and Spain pivoted entirely toward marine resources, expertly harvesting shellfish, trapping eels, and cooking sea mammals. They broadened their diets significantly, processing wild grains and capturing smaller, faster game like rabbits and birds. Every modified tool and adapted meal stands as a glowing testament to their phenomenal ingenuity and relentless determination to outsmart a rapidly changing planet. However, altering stone tools and diversifying dietary intake could not permanently override the fundamental constraints of their specialized physiology. Navigation of the expanding steppe required anatomical traits they simply did not possess. Meanwhile, the leaner, taller frames of migrating Homo sapiens proved flawlessly suited for tracking herds across endless plains under the blazing sun or freezing winds. Lighter bone structures and longer lower limbs provided immense mechanical efficiency for endurance running, allowing our direct ancestors to expend far fewer calories while covering the exact same vast distances. Two distinct evolutionary designs were suddenly subjected to an entirely new set of environmental rules, heavily favoring long-distance mobility over localized, explosive power. Population stability requires nurturing the next generation through their most vulnerable years. As the daily struggle for sufficient calories intensified, the physiological toll on reproducing females grew immense. Carrying a pregnancy to term and nursing an infant demands an enormous surplus of continuous energy. When harsh winters dragged on and successful hunts became increasingly sporadic, human biology naturally prioritized the survival of the mother over immediate reproduction. Birth intervals likely stretched out considerably, expanding from 3 years to perhaps 4 or 5 years between successful pregnancies. Slower reproductive rates quietly alter the demographic trajectory of any isolated population, setting off a deeply consequential mathematical chain reaction. Fewer children surviving the freezing winters meant fewer experienced hunters available to support the aging adults 2 decades later. This subtle, cascading demographic attrition operated without malice, driven by shifting ecological balances rather than catastrophic violence or sudden plagues. Localized bands gradually became smaller and increasingly isolated from one another as they spread out further to find sufficient grazing herds. Healthy genetic diversity requires frequent interaction between different tribal groups. When the immense distances separating these nomadic families became too great to cross safely during the harsh winters, their social networks began to slowly fray. The vibrant, interconnected cultural fabric that once stretched across the entire European continent began wearing thin at the edges. Tracing this gradual decline completely redefines our understanding of evolutionary success. Extinction frequently conjures dramatic, apocalyptic imagery filled with sudden cataclysms and immediate devastation. Science tells a far more nuanced, deeply poignant story regarding the eventual fading of our robust cousins. They did not fail due to a lack of intelligence, nor did they lack the necessary courage to face an unpredictable world. They were simply a masterfully crafted puzzle piece, perfectly designed for a specific slot that the planet decided to suddenly change. Their bodies and minds fought against the shifting atmospheric tides, utilizing every ounce of cognitive power to adapt, innovate, and survive against increasingly insurmountable odds. The shifting migration patterns in the fossil record show a clear, undeniable geographical retreat. As the northern latitudes became inhospitable and the Central European plains transformed into unyielding steppes, the remaining populations naturally gravitated toward the last familiar landscapes. They sought out rugged, mountainous terrains and deep coastal valleys where fragmented patches of ancient forests still clung desperately to the sheltered earth. These isolated pockets offered temporary sanctuary, providing brief glimpses of the world they once mastered. Driven slowly southward by the encroaching ice and transforming ecologies, their vast empire contracted over millennia, guiding the final generations toward the very edges of the continent where the land finally meets the endless sea. Southern Iberia presents a dramatic, towering limestone fortress, standing sentinel over the swirling currents where Atlantic waters rush directly into the Mediterranean basin. Rising precipitously from the coastal shelf, this monumental geological formation offered a microclimate insulated from the worst northern glaciations. Shielded by high mountain ranges stretching across the northern horizon, this localized pocket retained specific flora and fauna completely vanished from the rest of prehistoric Europe. Olive trees continued bearing fruit alongside hardy stone pines, while dense coastal scrublands sheltered abundant game year-round. Exploration of the vast, echoing chambers hidden within this peninsula reveals how intelligently these ultimate survivors utilized their final continental refuge. To adapt brilliantly to this specialized coastal niche, required demonstrating cognitive flexibility once again. Coastal foraging demanded a new set of specialized skills distinct from tracking steppe herbivores. Excavations conducted deep within these immense rock shelters uncover extensive evidence detailing a sophisticated marine diet. Charred remains analyzed by zoo archaeologists indicate they systematically hunted agile monk seals, trapped various coastal birds, and expertly harvested rich beds of blue mussels from the treacherous tidal zones. The processing of these marine resources required precise, inherited knowledge regarding tidal rhythms and lunar phases. Timing a successful foraging expedition along slippery, wave-battered rocks meant accurately reading the sky and understanding complex gravitational forces acting upon the waters. They mastered this dynamic aquatic frontier with the same calculated precision previously applied to primeval forests. Life atop these sheer cliffs provided a sweeping, panoramic view of a definitively impassable barrier. Standing at the absolute extremity of the landmass, they gazed outward across the glistening expanse separating them from unknown southern continents. No land bridge existed to carry them forward into the distant, hazy mountains visible just across the water on clear afternoons. For a nomadic lineage accustomed to walking endlessly toward newly discovered horizons, reaching this definitive geographical terminus marked a profound existential boundary. Physical geography simply offered nowhere left to wander. They had successfully navigated vast continental spans, crossed towering alpine ranges, and endured immense climatic upheavals, only to arrive at an abrupt shoreline where solid earth gave way entirely to deep, churning currents. Embracing this restricted territory, the final remaining bands established a deeply rhythmic, sustainable existence. Generations passed peacefully within these towering limestone arches, weaving their intricate social lives against a constant acoustic backdrop of crashing waves. Paleontological dating applied to ancient hearths located inside these coastal caves suggests these communities thrived here for thousands of years after their northern counterparts had vanished. Their enduring, stubborn presence in Iberia stands as a monumental testament to extreme biological resilience. Holding out so successfully against global atmospheric shifts proves they were never fragile beings, easily swept aside by environmental changes. They possessed an iron will to live, anchored by a vast reservoir of accumulated generational knowledge, allowing them to extract vital sustenance from both the rugged terrestrial landscape and the unforgiving sea. Mathematics, rather than immediate ecological failure or violent conflict, ultimately dictated the concluding demographic chapter. Sustaining a viable, healthy population across extended periods requires a critical mass of breeding individuals to maintain robust genetic diversity. As climatic pressures previously fractured their once continuous continental dominance into highly isolated pockets, the sheer physical distance separating surviving groups grew dangerously vast. Finding a suitable mate outside one's immediate family structure transitioned from a routine social exchange into an insurmountable logistical challenge. Deep sequencing conducted on late Neanderthal genomes confirms a steady, undeniable increase in localized inbreeding. This silent biological indicator points directly toward highly restricted social networks. Small, deeply isolated family units naturally become vulnerable to ordinary statistical fluctuations. Consider the simple, daily risks inherently attached to foraging and hunting in a rugged, unpredictable landscape. A twisted ankle preventing an experienced hunter from gathering necessary calories, or a sudden winter illness claiming a young, vital mother carries severely disproportionate consequences within a group numbering only a dozen individuals. Losing just one or two key members instantly destabilizes the entire social safety net. Birth rates naturally drop below the critical replacement threshold under such immense localized pressure. This mathematical tipping point requires no catastrophic asteroid impact, no devastating continental plague, and certainly no hostile encounters with arriving modern humans. A given population simply grows smaller with each passing generation, lacking the essential demographic buoyancy needed to replenish its diminishing numbers. Visualizing this specific decline requires discarding theatrical, apocalyptic tropes. Picture a single, glowing ember resting quietly on a massive stone hearth after a roaring fire has consumed its primary fuel. No sudden gusts of wind violently extinguish it. No deliberate action crushes the fragile coal. Ambient heat simply radiates outward into the cold night air, naturally cooling degree by degree until the vibrant orange glow gently transitions into grey, silent ash. The final robust populations faded from the Iberian coast through this inexorable, peaceful process. Their physical disappearance represents a quiet, dignified conclusion to a long, successful biological reign spanning hundreds of millennia. A thoughtful walk through the excavated trenches of these ancient coastal caves today evokes a powerful sense of reverence. Stratigraphic layers carefully peeled back by contemporary scientists reveal the precise moments when these ancient fires finally ceased burning. Uppermost sedimentary deposits containing their highly distinctive Mousterian flint tools transition seamlessly into sterile coastal sediment, devoid of sudden signs indicating struggle, warfare, or rapid displacement. They simply packed their remaining implements, moved perhaps slightly further down the coast, and eventually ceased leaving any physical imprint upon the fossil record. The abandonment of these coastal sanctuaries concluded an immense historical arc spanning over 300,000 years, closing the physical book on an incredibly resilient branch of hominin evolution. Deep reflection on their journey from high-altitude northern glaciers to the sun-baked limestone cliffs of the Mediterranean shifts our modern perspective. We must continually honor their magnificent survival journey. For hundreds of millennia, they bravely faced freezing elements that would effortlessly crush any modern human lacking advanced technological assistance. They loved their children fiercely, mourned their departed companions respectfully, crafted beautiful abstract symbols in deep caves, and maintained an unyielding grip on life despite relentless environmental turbulence. Their physical departure from the Earth does not signify an evolutionary failure. Every single biological lineage eventually encounters shifting variables it cannot physically outmaneuver. Their enduring story remains an epic saga of triumph, showcasing how fiercely an intelligent mind will fight to preserve its own existence against overwhelming odds. Looking outward from the ancient cave entrance today, the very same Mediterranean sun warms the timeless rock. Tides continue their endless, highly rhythmic advance and retreat across the pebble beaches just below. Physical vessels that once navigated this rugged, demanding coastline may have slowly dissipated into historical shadows, but a closer examination of deep time reveals a magnificent, unforeseen truth. Biology rarely allows an extensively refined, successful genetic code to vanish without leaving a permanent trace. While the isolated bands huddled in Gibraltar represented the final, pure, anatomical expressions of their specific lineage, the underlying biological essence had already embarked upon a different, spectacular journey elsewhere. Decades ago, concluding their narrative at the edge of these vast waters felt absolute, anthropologists solemnly closed their textbooks, firmly believing the final chapter had been definitively written within the cooling ashes of southern Iberia. Contemporary science, driven constantly by our relentless desire to reconstruct the past down to the molecular level, flatly refuses to accept such a definitive, abrupt ending. The extraction of microscopic fragments of ancient biological material from deep inside fossilized bones promises to unravel an evolutionary plot twist so profound, it permanently forces us to rewrite the fundamental definition of modern humanity. Physical bodies eventually gave out against the relentless march of time, but a monumental genetic legacy remained securely encoded, silently waiting to be uncovered tens of thousands of years later. This silent transition marks not a termination, but a profound transformation. Staring out over the waves, those final individuals carried within them the accumulated resilience of countless generations. They stood as the ultimate physical manifestation of a brilliantly adapted human form. Yet, the story refuses to end with their fading footprints on the Iberian shoreline. High-tech laboratories, equipped with phenomenal computing power, are currently unlocking secrets buried deep within the helical structures of ancient DNA. We are actively preparing to trace an invisible thread connecting those vanished coastal populations directly to the sprawling, hyper-connected modern world. Their remarkable journey continues, shifting seamlessly from the macroscopic realm of towering fossils to the microscopic universe of base pairs and genetic inheritance. To peer into this invisible domain requires technological wizardry that would have seemed magical only a single generation ago. Scientists donned in heavily insulated, positive pressure suits now manipulate pulverized bone dust inside controlled, clean rooms, desperate to isolate intact molecular strands, surviving the brutal degradation of deep time. When biological tissue rests underground for tens of thousands of years, organic material naturally fragments into billions of chaotic, microscopic shards. Soil bacteria rapidly invade the cellular architecture, leaving behind a heavily contaminated biochemical soup. The extraction of a pure hominin sequence from such profound decay pushes human ingenuity to its absolute limits. Deep within the temporal bone of the skull lies a specialized anatomical structure known as the petrous part. Earning its name from the Latin word for rock, this tiny, ultra-dense biological fortress acts as a perfect molecular vault. Within this incredibly compact calcium matrix, fragile DNA helices remain shielded from degrading groundwater and voracious environmental microbes. Unlocking this specific microscopic vault allowed paleogeneticists to finally extract the intimately detailed letters of a vanished biological alphabet. To overcome the staggering hurdles of sample contamination, geneticists engineered entirely new computational algorithms capable of sorting through massive digital haystacks. Supercomputers hum endlessly, analyzing trillions of fragmented biological codes to separate modern human dust and ancient soil microbes from the actual target DNA. Slowly and painstakingly, researchers managed to map the entire genomic blueprint of our robust cousins. Reading this biological manual delivered a revelation that permanently shattered the established boundaries of evolutionary biology. Data streaming across laboratory monitors presented an impossible truth that traditional anthropology had vigorously denied for over a century. A comparison of the newly reconstructed ancient genome against DNA samples gathered from diverse modern human populations yielded shocking, mathematically undeniable alignments. People walking the streets of modern cities today, specifically those carrying non-African ancestry, harbor distinct molecular sequences perfectly matching the genetic signature extracted from Pleistocene fossils. Finding these exact molecular markers inside our own living cells proves definitively that those ancient encounters across the Eurasian steppe involved far more than mere observation or technological trade. Intimate bonds formed beneath the ancient stars, distinct evolutionary lineages separated by hundreds of millennia of geographical isolation found enough familiarity within one another to produce healthy, thriving offspring. Producing fertile children requires a close biological distance, confirming unequivocally that sapiens and Neanderthals remained fundamentally compatible. Beyond the raw mechanics of reproduction, successfully raising those hybrid children within ancient tribal structures demands immense social acceptance and deep communal empathy. Picture an ancient palimpsest, a precious medieval parchment crafted from highly durable animal skin. Early scribes frequently sought fresh writing surfaces by deliberately scraping away older texts to pen entirely new manuscripts over the top. A casual glance at the document today reveals only the modern, freshly inked narrative. Exposing that very same parchment to specialized ultraviolet light, however, makes the original, seemingly erased letters glow faintly beneath the current script. Modern human biology functions exactly like this layered, historical document. Homo sapiens wrote the dominant, visible text of contemporary humanity across the globe. Yet, reading our deep molecular layers under the brilliant light of modern genetics reveals the unmistakable, enduring ink of Homo neanderthalensis bleeding brilliantly through the pages of our shared genetic code. Biology labels this remarkable genetic merging as archaic introgression. Far from a hostile conquest or an absolute erasure, this phenomenon represents a beautiful, highly complex biological fusion. As nomadic sapiens bands pushed deeper into unfamiliar northern territories, bringing children into the world alongside their robust neighbors provided an immediate, localized survival advantage. Those newly born hybrid children inherited invaluable genetic tools already tuned by hundreds of thousands of years of harsh environmental testing. Enduring the lethal cold and fighting off novel local pathogens became significantly easier when carrying a biological cheat code gifted directly by the original masters of the continent. We must radically adjust our understanding of extinction in light of this spectacular discovery. Disappearing from the macroscopic fossil record does not equate to absolute biological termination. Physical traits like heavily pronounced brow ridges and enormously flared rib cages dissolved into the vast demographic ocean over immense stretches of time. Those specific anatomical configurations ceased to be statistically necessary as global climates eventually stabilized and brilliant technological innovations like tailored clothing reduced the immediate biological need for massive internal thermal regulation. Although the distinct bodily shape vanished from the physical landscape, the most crucial, foundational elements of their being survived, the sweeping environmental collapses. Their living code successfully jumped the evolutionary ship, integrating smoothly into the thriving demographic wave of incoming populations. Tracing these introgressed genes through the modern population highlights a monumental testament to their endurance. Scientists estimate that roughly 1 to 2% of the genome in modern Europeans and Asians originates directly from Neanderthal ancestors. While a single-digit percentage might sound initially insignificant, calculating that fraction across billions of living individuals reveals an astonishing mathematical reality. More total Neanderthal DNA exists actively circulating on the planet today than during any point in the Pleistocene epoch. Their genetic footprint actually expanded exponentially, piggybacking on the explosive global migration of modern humanity. Reaching distant shores and remote islands, those ancient hunters could never have possibly imagined navigating. Natural selection acted as a rigorous editor throughout this protracted merging process, aggressively preserving the specific genetic sequences that provided immediate environmental benefits, while quietly discarding the redundant or biologically incompatible code. We did not merely absorb their DNA randomly. Human biology selectively integrated their finest evolutionary achievements. We integrated their specialized immune system components to rapidly identify regional viruses, and we adopted their specific keratin-producing genes to fortify our skin against the biting cold. Human evolution operated much like a masterfully forged metallic alloy. Pure copper and raw tin possess distinct, useful individual properties when isolated. Melting them together under intense heat creates bronze, a completely new, vastly superior material, retaining the fundamental atomic strengths of both original elements. Forging this biological alloy across the Eurasian expanse demonstrates exactly how deeply intertwined our destinies truly were. Discovering their DNA interwoven so tightly with our own destroys the outdated, arrogant notion of human exceptionalism as an isolated, solitary phenomenon. We are incredibly complex mosaics, biological tapestries woven from multiple threads of intelligent hominin lineages that once bravely navigated the ice-swept world. Every modern achievement, from exploring the darkest ocean trenches to launching intricate telescopes into deep space, relies upon a physical vessel constructed partially from blueprints drafted by our vanished siblings. Decoding this profound connection stands as one of the crowning achievements of contemporary science. It fundamentally proves that human beings possess an innate, driving capacity to seek kinship across immense physical and cultural divides. Our migrating ancestors looked past distinctly different facial architectures and divergent evolutionary histories to recognize a shared fundamental essence. Embracing the stranger across the valley ensured that the incredible resilience forged in the glacial north would never truly perish. They did not die out in the dark, shivering and alone. They effectively became us. We no longer need to dig exhaustively through frozen earth or explore lightless subterranean caverns to find traces of their enduring existence. The most perfectly preserved archaeological site on the entire planet currently resides directly inside your own living cells. We carry their silent whispers securely in our cellular architecture, honoring their prehistoric struggles with every beat of a modern heart. Modern genomics provides the ultimate, undeniable proof that the physical boundaries separating species often blur magnificently into a unified story of survival. We stand today not as the solitary survivors of a ruthless evolutionary competition, but as the living, breathing culmination of a massive, shared ancestral triumph. Examining the specific ways these ancient genetic fragments continue to dictate our modern physical reality opens an entirely new, breathtaking window into our daily lives. Billions of individuals walking across bustling metropolitan streets right now unknowingly exhibit physical traits forged during the Pleistocene epoch. A close look at a crowd waiting for a crosswalk reveals a stunning array of biological diversity fundamentally rooted in ancient encounters. Skin structurally protects those pedestrians from intense ultraviolet radiation and daily environmental wear through specific cellular mechanisms. Deep within the epithelial cells, genetic instructions inherited directly from our robust cousins continuously manufacture tough, fibrous proteins known chemically as keratin. This specialized structural material tightly binds cellular networks together, forming an incredibly durable barrier against environmental stress. Inheriting these particular alleles allowed migrating ancestors to rapidly adapt to significantly lower temperatures and shifting sunlight angles across northern latitudes. Hair thickness, the tendency for strands to grow perfectly straight or tightly coil, and even the distinct way human skin reacts to sudden drops in temperature, all trace their molecular origins back to hominins who never saw a modern city. Adaptation to variable solar radiation required precise biochemical calibration. Near the equator, high melanin concentrations shielded ancestral skin from cellular damage caused by relentless sun exposure. Wandering further north toward the expansive Eurasian steppes drastically reduced access to direct sunlight, severely inhibiting the natural synthesis of crucial vitamin D necessary for strong bone development. Pre-existing inhabitants had already solved this physiological puzzle. Genetic analysis proves they possessed multiple variants governing hair color and skin pigmentation, including specific mutations producing pale skin and fiery red hair. Absorption of these diverse pigmentation alleles allowed newly arriving populations to rapidly adjust their own melanin production. Lighter skin absorbed scarce ultraviolet rays far more efficiently during long, dark winters, ensuring healthy skeletal growth for developing children. A glance at auburn hair catching the afternoon light today offers a direct, highly visible link to evolutionary adaptations honed beneath glacial skies. Moving deeper beneath the epidermis, we encounter an even more profound biological inheritance dictating cellular survival on a microscopic battlefield. Pathogens unique to the dense Eurasian forests and sweeping steppes constantly threatened to eradicate newly arriving hominin populations. Modern humans stepping out of the African continent lacked the necessary biological defenses to combat these localized, aggressive microbial threats. By intertwining their lineages, our ancestors essentially downloaded an ancient, battle-tested biological software patch. Geneticists have successfully pinpointed specific sequences within the human leukocyte antigen complex, embedded tightly within our modern cellular membranes. These specialized receptor proteins function as microscopic sentinels, rapidly identifying foreign bacterial and viral signatures before alerting the broader immune network to mount a massive counterattack. Carrying these ancient defense codes allows human bodies today to execute swift, highly aggressive immune responses against a vast array of unseen biological threats. Surviving a deadly archaic virus millennia ago required an immune system capable of incredibly fierce, rapid mobilization. We continue utilizing those exact same ancient defensive blueprints whenever a common cold or novel influenza strain enters our respiratory tract. Cellular machinery ramps up instantly, elevating core body temperatures to incinerate invading microbes while deploying specialized white blood cells to hunt down infected tissue. However, biological adaptations engineered for a radically different world occasionally struggle to perfectly align with modern hygiene and pristine living conditions. Medical researchers studying autoimmune conditions increasingly link hyperactive immune responses directly back to these inherited archaic alleles. An immune network, originally calibrated to fight off severe, life-threatening Pleistocene infections, sometimes overreacts to benign modern environmental triggers, attacking healthy tissue out of an ancient, misplaced, defensive zeal. The identification of this ancestral connection alters how medical science approaches treating complex immunological disorders today. Doctors no longer view these ailments merely as sudden biological errors, but recognize them as echoing remnants of a successful prehistoric survival strategy currently operating somewhat out of context. Beyond structural proteins and rapid immune responses, these invisible genetic architects quietly influence complex metabolic functions. Digesting dense, fat-rich diets during harsh winter months required highly specialized lipid metabolism pathways. Securing enough calories from massive herbivores meant processing immense quantities of animal fat rapidly and efficiently. Genetic sequences dictating how modern human bodies currently break down dietary lipids, store essential energy, and regulate complex cholesterol levels retain distinct archaic signatures. Researchers isolate specific gene variants strongly associated with fat storage and cellular energy distribution, tracing them cleanly back to those isolated northern populations. Processing a heavy, high-calorie meal today triggers precise enzymatic reactions perfected by hunters resting beside ancient hearths. Our modern digestive tracts continue to rely heavily upon these borrowed metabolic pathways, proving that basic biological sustenance remains intricately tied to those who first mastered the frozen landscapes. Internal biological clocks dictate precise daily rhythms bearing the indelible mark of ancient sunrises. Analyzing modern chronotypes reveals that genes heavily influencing circadian rhythms often possess deep prehistoric origins. Adjusting to the drastic seasonal variations in daylight hours, typical of northern latitudes, demanded an incredibly flexible internal timepiece. Deep within the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus regulates daily sleep cycles by meticulously tracking ambient light. Individuals who naturally wake before dawn or instinctively feel more alert as twilight approaches are actively expressing evolutionary adaptations forged under shifting global skies. Sleeping patterns, dietary processing, and physical endurance are not merely arbitrary modern traits, but carefully preserved echoes of an ancient, successful design. Waking up naturally as the sun barely crests the horizon physically connects modern individuals to hunters who desperately needed to maximize every single minute of scarce winter daylight. Reading this microscopic text represents a staggering triumph of collective human intellect. The development of specialized mass spectrometers capable of distinguishing fossilized molecular sequences from common dirt proves an unyielding desire to deeply understand our origins. We refuse to let the silent Earth keep its secrets hidden forever. Building immense computational models to track genetic drift across thousands of generations showcases a mind that continuously expands far beyond basic survival necessities. This relentless pursuit of scientific truth elevates humanity beyond mere biological existence, transforming us into the conscious, waking observers of our own evolutionary journey. Unlocking the genome requires unprecedented collaboration across thousands of scientific disciplines, beautifully highlighting our unique ability to pool cognitive resources. We employ artificial intelligence, advanced biochemistry, and theoretical mathematics simply to piece together a biological puzzle scattered hundreds of thousands of years ago. The realization that human biology actively curates an ancient biological library redefines our existential place within the natural world. We previously imagined ourselves entirely separate from the deep past, neatly insulated by soaring glass skyscrapers and advanced digital technology. Yet, a simple scrape on the knee heels, utilizing coagulation factors, mapped out hundreds of thousands of years ago. A sudden sneeze expels irritants driven by muscular reflexes perfected long before the first agricultural settlements appeared. Human beings act as walking, breathing biological archives, holding on to the most resilient, highly effective survival mechanisms ever engineered by natural selection. Acknowledgement of this internal reality fundamentally dissolves the imaginary boundaries separating modern civilization from the raw, untamed earth. We remain intimately tethered to the natural world, actively carrying its most brilliant biological inventions completely hidden within our cellular architecture. Looking backward through modern genomics forces us to discard the concept of a solitary, unblemished human lineage forever. Purity, in evolutionary terms, guarantees only stagnation and biological fragility. True resilience arises from biological synthesis, from actively embracing different traits, and from blending disparate strengths into a significantly more robust whole. We conquered every extreme environment on this globe, not by remaining rigidly uniform, but by absorbing the immense, hard-won physiological wisdom of those who arrived long before us. Their legacy pulses quietly within our veins, empowering every subsequent generation to push further, climb higher, and adapt to increasingly complex global challenges. Human exceptionalism stems exactly from this radical diversity, proving that collaborative biological exchange always outperforms isolated competition. Contemplating this vast, intertwined genetic network naturally invites a haunting, deeply fascinating thought experiment. Planetary climates remain constantly in flux, entirely capable of shifting dramatically over immense stretches of time. Suppose global temperatures plummeted drastically once again, rapidly expanding immense ice sheets southward across the continents. Navigating such a brutal, freezing reality would instantly alter the intense pressures of natural selection. If raw survival suddenly demanded massive structural biology, extreme cold weather adaptations, and incredibly aggressive immune responses, human biology would inevitably call upon its vast genetic reserves. Hidden alleles currently sitting dormant or quietly expressing minor traits would suddenly find themselves heavily favored by the unforgiving environment. Over thousands of successive generations, natural selection would systematically pull those ancient, deeply buried genetic sequences right back to the visible surface. Gazing into a frozen puddle or a polished glass mirror thousands of years from now, subsequent generations navigating that hypothetical frozen world might observe an incredibly familiar face staring back. Heavier brow ridges might naturally re-emerge to shield delicate eyes from blinding glacial glare. Broader, more robust physical frames could easily reconstruct themselves to perfectly conserve vital core temperatures. Wide nasal passages would once again flawlessly warm the biting, sub-zero air before it reached delicate lungs. We would not devolve into archaic beings, but rather tap into an incredibly sophisticated, pre-existing biological toolkit carefully stored within our own cells. Recognizing that dormant potential fundamentally changes how we view ourselves today, we are capable of shape-shifting across millennia, drawing upon a shared ancestral reservoir to endure whatever planetary upheavals tomorrow might bring. Our physical form remains beautifully fluid, constantly sculpted by the environment, while relying on ancient architectural plans. Knowing that we carry the brilliant survivors of the Ice Ages directly inside our genetic code inspires immense, unwavering confidence in our collective future. Their undisputed physical strength, profound cultural innovations, and sheer willpower did not vanish into the unforgiving earth. Those magnificent traits successfully crossed the immense chasm of deep time to reside permanently within us. As we continuously look outward to map distant galaxies, cure incredibly complex diseases, and engineer technologies defying ancient imaginations, we do so powered by an immensely diverse, beautifully merged biological heritage. Humanity stands unified at the pinnacle of evolutionary achievement, forever guided by the resilient minds walking silently alongside us into the boundless tomorrow. We are the architects of the future, precisely because we are the unbroken continuation of the past.